Welcome to Motivational IQ, where we open your brain and learn about your motivation, your capabilities, and your potential. I'm going to start by giving an example from my life. I've raised four children, and as I taught each of them to drive, or tried to teach each of them to drive, I discovered something interesting. Each of my children were confident in their ability to drive before they learned how to drive, and each of them had different characteristics and approaches to how they figured it out. What's interesting is all of them had different motivations for driving and different motivations for studying or practicing. But I learned that there's one common process that all of them followed. Each one of them, in their confidence, because they'd driven with me or ridden with me, not driven, but, watched other people drive and taken tests and done simulators and played video games, felt like they were confident they could just get in the car and go. But all of them didn't know what they didn't know. And then, as they got into the car for the first time or opened up the manual and looked at a dashboard for the first time, they started asking questions like, what's this? Why are there three pedals? What are all these knobs, buttons, and switches? And slowly their minds opened and allowed us to start dropping in all the instruction. They had passed into what I call the now know what they don't know. The awareness of what they needed to learn was upon them. Well, they practiced, and all of them proceeded at different levels and different speed and pace, and they tried different things and repeated things, right? They learned how to do it, and they completed it a number of times, and pretty soon they were pretty good at operating, right? Good drivers. We could say, hey, go to the store, pick up bread, go to the neighbor's house and deliver this plate of cookies. They now, at this point, I'm going to call it, they know what they know. And they're confident in their ability to do the things that they've already gotten used to and have practiced. Now, fast forward a number of years, right? Those who have driven, especially the same route for a number of times, sometimes you'll get to that place and not even realize that you were driving the entire time. This is now where you don't know what you do know, where it's autonomous almost. This is actually the pattern that all of us take as we learn. And what drives us as we go through these steps is what motivational intelligence is all about. The environment, the factors, the path, the journey, where you are, the position, the direction, the motivators, what matters most at each point along the route is motivational intelligence. Now that we've got that story kind of as a baseline to refer to, let's talk a little bit about what that is. That's called the conscious competency model. It's the process by which all humans go through to learn something, right? When they know they have to figure something out because they're unaware of what it is, they go through this process where they become humbled, where they're aware of what they don't know, and then they get good at it, and then it becomes natural. Everybody kind of likes a spot in that spectrum more than others. I really enjoy the part where I'm learning, where I don't know what I don't know, and then I'm aware of it. I love that process and repeat a lot, which is why I've got so many books and a lot of references that you're going to hear in this podcast. But the conscious competency model really applies to new scenarios and things that you want to change. I learned a lot about how that works the way I grew up. I grew up in central Indiana. My father was a school teacher. My mother stayed at home to take care of the kids. There were seven children. I was the middle of seven. And money was scarce. This was the 1970s, coming out of, high interest rates. My dad had built the home that we lived on. The land was given to us by my grandfather. It was of woods. And I money was scarce. And so we would do projects to afford nice things, trips, restaurants. Um, we actually saved up and built an in-ground pool. We did it all ourselves, saved a lot of money, but like we put years of effort into that. What was interesting is I really liked to work. And so I would trade dish duty. I liked outdoor, hard, sweaty, running work, right? So I'd trade dish duty, sweeping, vacuuming, and other thing like that for outdoor, splitting wood, chopping wood, hauling gravel, taking care of the animals when I was younger, things like that, and really learned the value of kind of that hard work. But what developed me different was I really enjoyed the work, but money was scarce, and so it became this really large reward. At the same time, I started to become astute and aware that other people, almost everybody I knew, hated the thing they did for which they got money. I was constantly looking for ways to earn money. I would mow lawns. I would cut wood. I would sell firewood. At one point, I sold morel mushrooms that I found in the property where I grew up, and did pretty well. In fact, the first time that I ever listed them, I listed them on the radio, which the local Crawfordsville, Indiana radio station was just a couple of miles from our house. And the first person that came to buy was actually the DJ. Cut to commercial, drove over, bought some morel mushrooms. And I discovered that that was very fulfilling too, because all of a sudden now I've got money that I can earn, that I can burn and use. But I kept hearing stories of people who just hated their jobs, hated going to work. In fact, I remember one time, um, fast forward about 30 years, we were in a neighborhood talking with the neighbors, and one of them said, to this other guy, "Why do you drive so slow to work?" And he said, "Because I'm going to work. Why are you in a hurry to get there?" And it just reminded me that most people just really don't enjoy the work they do that they get rewarded for, right? They mostly enjoy the things that they spend money and sacrifice time and effort for, like hobbies or pets or relationships. Well, that started to create this dissonance in me that said, what is it that really motivates people? Why do you like, Andy, splitting wood? I mean, there's a big dopamine rush when you crack that piece of hickory or oak open, and you've been pounding on it with a wedge. Why didn't I like dishes? Why didn't I like vacuuming? Um, Probably because it was indoors, to be honest. So I made it my life mission to figure out why people are moved, what they like, what they don't like, and why sometimes we hate the things that we used to like, and sometimes love the things we used to hate. And so I started posing all these questions. Again, later in my career, I went forward, I got an undergraduate degree, got a graduate degree in business, started working in IT. Um, i- and I listened to this TED talk by Dan Pink, and it's called The Surprising Science Behind What Motivates Us. It's one of the greatest TED Talks, like one of the most listened to, but he talks about how extrinsic motivators actually diminish creativity and output. They're a negative motivator. And then he talked about the three components that really truly make up motivation. He wrote a book called Drive: The Surprising Science Behind What Motivates Us. Highly recommend it. And he in that book goes through the science, psychology, the philosophy, everything, the emotions, all of it, the mentality that make up what makes us move. And there's three things that make us move, according to Dan Peak. And I found this to be true in almost everything that I've ever seen that dives into the topic. Number one is autonomy. Okay, this is the ability to make choices, some control over your destiny. Um, Autonomy. I call it choice. The second one is mastery, and it has this feel of getting better at things, but really what it's about is the ability to see progress, measuring and improving, right? So it's all about like the numbers and the details and like things like that. So think about it, right? If you've got something that drives you, but you're not making any progress on it, it's really hard to keep motivated to do it. Like if you're trying to run a faster mile, but you just keep running, at that same pace, eventually you're going to lose your kind of gusto unless something else is overriding that. That's what motivational intelligence is about. The third piece is purpose. So autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Purpose is being part of something bigger. It's the why, right? It's what makes you like long term really care about. If you think about it, if you're doing work but don't have a why, it feels weird. If you're doing work and you can't see progress or understand how it impacts, it feels weird. And if you're doing work and have no choice in how you do it, it really feels poor. But there are times when we're motivated to do work that doesn't have any of those things. That's where things get really, really interesting. To me, the most surprising thing was when I layered autonomy, mastery, and purpose, or choice, progress, and why on top of the conscious competency model. See, at the very beginning of learning something new, when you don't know what you don't know, or you become painfully aware of the things that you don't know, what really matters is having instructions, having directions. When my kids first got in the car, they said, "What are all these knobs, buttons, and pedals?" Right? What? Which ones is the? Where are the lights? How do I turn on the car? Right? Instruction mattered the most. Then, as you get better at it, right? You know what you know, and you start to get good at it and skilled. It becomes a smooth operation. The children learning to drive, they would start to want to make choices on themselves, right? What happens if I do this? The good part is they usually ask before they did it, but sometimes I would say, do this and see what it feels like, especially living in Wisconsin where there's snow in the winters. So every year I would get out with the new drivers and say, let's go to a parking lot and let's learn how to redrive in snow and let's experiment. And then I want you to try and get out of it and then try and get into it like in a safe environment. So in other words, what matters at the beginning when you're in that conscious competency cycle where you're learning something, first is progress, instructions, directions, details, how to, what to. Okay. The next thing after you start to get good at it is choices, making choices. The last one, the why, it matters when you're an autopilot champion. We do things out of habit because we know they have an innate purpose. There's a deliberate reason that we're doing it, right? We go to work sometimes because we know we got to provide for a loved one. We might do it because we want to buy our dream home. We might do it because of something else, but there's always this purpose that's like buried in there. Important to know is that all activities need each one of those three ingredients. And you can represent them as what, progress, how, choice, and why, purpose. Autonomy, mastery, purpose. All activities need why, how, and what, but they need them in different degrees of strength. And I'm going to call out another book, Simon Sinek, who also has a really, really good TED talk called Start with Why. And he wrote a book called Start with Why. And what's interesting is who that talk resonates with and where it resonates. Because at the time that he gave that talk, white collar culture was really, really strong. But a lot of people were struggling with the like, why does my job have meaning? And why does my company have meaning? Right. And so he pointed out that if the why isn't there, in fact, he says, you gotta start with why, because it's the foundation upon which everything else is made. If you don't have it, work feels hollow. And great examples. Great TED talk. Go listen to it. Anyway, everywhere you got to have why, you got to have what, and you got to have how. In other words, you have to be able to make choices. You have to feel that it's got a purpose, and you have to be able to see progress. Sometimes those aren't as important as other things. Case in point, if you break your leg, heaven forbid, and you go to the doctor, you don't want to have the doctor talk to you about why it's important that your leg heals, unless it's going to change what you do. Think about that for a second. What you start with is, okay, what do I need to do to get this to heal? What can I do? Can I get it in water? Can I put pressure on it? You can do. Do I need to have a cast? Do I need to have surgery? Right? These are all the what's. Right? The why doesn't matter unless it's going to change something obvious in the what, which is an interesting mix. So when things go south, things get difficult, when emotion rides high or difficulty just appears on the horizon, right? Health goes bad, relationship goes sour, work gets frustrating, and team starts to collapse, whatever it is. Why suddenly becomes a lot less important unless it's the strong overriding change agent. Let me give an example and then I'll come back to this. Very few of us would enjoy working up to our knees in muddy sewage water, cold, wet, hungry, and tired. But almost everybody I know would be willing to do that if a friend, loved one, or even a stranger's home was in danger of flooding. We'd be out there without sleep, without food, without warmth, trying to stack sandbags in gunk. It's an overriding purpose and it strengthens everything else. We might say, what do we need to do? Or we might start to say, hey, I've got a better idea, right? And that's the manifestation that comes in the process of going through that conscious competency cycle. All right. So going back where why overrides things, right? Purpose can override. Very rarely does progress, mastery, the steps override things. And when it does, it tends to be a problem. In corporate America, they call that hoping for A and getting B, right? So rewarding someone for doing something when what you want them is the result of the doing, not the doing. And so the mastery manifests too loudly, and the person does it because they don't enjoy it. They just do it. They're complicit, right? Choice sometimes manifests, but when choice manifests, it's usually because of rebellion, and you got to be careful of that. Sometimes you do it out of spite. And so, again, conscious competency overridden by the attributes of why, how, and what, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, or what, how, and why in that order of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, is really what motivational intelligence is all about. This is the core of kind of how I look at everything. I look at books, movies, philosophies, religion, culture, politics, news, reaction, human endeavors, everything from this perspective. And it is fascinating. I love it. I look forward to telling you more about it, telling stories, citing movies, talking about why does Sam Gamgee do this and it resonates when someone else does it and it doesn't. We're going to talk about that. Why, right? Why do other things? Why do we want to jump up when they succeed in Project Hail Mary or The Martian? Andy Weir knows how to get your brain motivationally aligned so that when that thing happens, you get chills. Okay. I look forward to telling you more, but let's pause for now. That's the foundation of motivational intelligence. More to come. Thank you. Episode 1 is done. I look forward to more. Next episode, we're going to talk about objectives, SMART goals, and careers. Remember, you can always book a free initial consult. No problem. Love to talk to you on my website, motivationaliqpodcast.com or theworkjoyproject.com. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment, ask a question, leave a review, and please share, subscribe, show us that we should keep engaging in this. We're glad to do it. As always, thank you and stay engaged or keep trying. Until next time.